People come to my house and they see my ribbons and they say, "Oh, you've won all these ribbons at dog shows," but they rarely ask if I'm the dog.
So people say you've won all these ribbons at dog shows, but they rarely ask if you're the dog. Huh. What am I expecting to see? Let's take a look at this wall here. We have a framed picture of Iron Man. That's nice. I see a second place ribbon for Puppypalooza. Los Angeles Pony and Critter Club. Maybe that's like an equestrian thing? Though owning a horse in Los Angeles sounds kind of expensive. DomCon LA? Yep, I think we have the reason why people aren't asking what kind of dog shows these are.
I've won quite a few. This is the High Point Award for Puppypalooza, and then these two are the best ones I have because these are my two best in shows. I got these at DomCon. My name is Tony, and I'm a human pup.
I'm Andrew. I'm Tony's husband and trainer.
Pet play is any time that a person takes on the role of an animal, and they emulate that animal, either through their behavior or their actions.
I can imagine being someone who just met Tony and Andrew. They invite me into their home, I see the dog show ribbons from DomCon, and I immediately want to leave. And let me be clear, because there is a reason why most people would be weirded out and react this way. It's because you cannot separate behaviors from psychology. Despite how much fat acceptance advocates will try to gaslight everyone, if I see someone who is 500 pounds, then I know they have issues with mental health, and they are using overeating as a coping mechanism. The stuff you do and the way you present yourself tells people about your psychology. That's why people view this puppy play behavior as strange. So what does this all say about Tony?
I've been involved in pet play for my entire life. A lot of kids like to play pretend. They like to pretend to be an animal, and they enjoy doing it. I just never grew out of that.
Tony describes it as a behavior that was never grown out of. So we have a person who is developmentally arrested or missed a developmental milestone and is stuck doing a behavior that is commonly acted out by young children. In the description of the video, Tony is quoted saying, "To me, a dog is everything pure in the world. Dogs experience the world through a lens of pure joy that I don't think other animals have." Well, I mean, me personally, I've seen plenty of dogs that are neglected or unhappy. It really just depends on the owner. But while the YouTube channel Truly is showing this as just an alternative, quirky lifestyle for their show Extreme Love, what Tony has actually described here is escapism. That's why most people perceive this behavior as strange, and you have to ask, what is Tony trying to escape? We were never given an answer from the documentary, but usually in these cases, it's a toxic or abusive environment during childhood, or it could be something like the unfortunate death of a parent at a young age. Also, with reasonable accuracy, we can guess that she is dealing with depression because she specifically said that she wanted to be a dog because dogs are a representation of pure joy. She's trying to physically act out something that she's lacking. This is all just basic, well-known stuff in the psychological fields, and I'm not sure why we have to pretend this stuff is normal. I'm also not sure why we have a vapid group of people actively trying to censor anyone who tries to render help to people with these issues so that those people can live healthy lives and be happy. Anyway.
My responsibility is similar to the responsibility with a regular dog. The first
dog. I'm a regular dog. I'm just different.
Okay, that was the thing that was just said. Let's continue.
We have bio dogs, and I do train them because no barking. But, if you want to make a big stink, you're an adult human. You can do what you want.
Actually, I'm going to give them points for this one. They train their bio dogs to not bark, which is in stark contrast to some of the complete sociopaths I personally have had the pleasure of living next to, who see it fit to leave their dogs outside and let those dogs bark nonstop for hours on end at all hours of the day. So despite their weird clarification on vocabulary, Andrew has earned my respect for this. But before I spend 30 minutes ranting about how much I don't like people who don't train their dogs, let's get to what everyone's thinking.
I don't think pet play is sexual. I do think that to an extent it is erotic because it is intimate.
The topic of sexuality in pet play can be pretty controversial. We don't make it sexual, but I have nothing against those who do. That's great. But more power to those who do.
What was that stare? Like, I completely don't believe you. I believe the idea that you guys aren't sexual with this less than I believe that 30-year-old guy whose girlfriend pretends she's 5 and said it wasn't sexual.
I'm a pizza. There are a lot of people in the community that do this sexually, and I am not one of those people. This is a completely non-sexual lifestyle for me.
I know a lot of people look down on more hardcore versions of the DDLG subset, but for a lot of people, it's non-sexual. And like for us, it's non-sexual.
Now, if only there was a word that would accurately describe people who would make that kind of relationship sexual. Huh. There was also a cat girl that Truly interviewed who said that her pet play activity wasn't sexual, while she was basically in lingerie.
So kitten play, I put it into two categories, one of being lifestyle and one of being more like bedroom activity. For me, it doesn't ever really lead to that. It's kind of just our day-to-day life.
Tell me, how is it that there are all these people who do take it in that direction, yet the only ones who ever get interviewed are the ones who don't take it into the bedroom? Either the producers of these documentaries just so happen to beat the odds, or the people being interviewed are lying. Which is actually where my issue with this stuff lies, or with kink in general, because a ton of people are taking a bedroom fetish or salacious behavior and acting components of it out in public. If you watched my other video on this, then you saw the DDLG couple acting out that aspect of their relationship in a public park with kids in the background. You also saw the other dog girl, Danny, from that video doing her stuff in public view, and while she was probably shooting content for her OnlyFans account. Stuff like this is not appropriate in a public setting, especially in areas with children.
What have I got here? What have I got here?
Oh, give me that.
Even if it's not salacious behavior, if young people see adults barking at each other in public or other kink behavior, a percentage of them, who are likely not having the greatest childhoods, will adopt that behavior as a social contagion and then start engaging in escapism instead of working to solve their problems, all while at the same time making them socially undesirable to their peers, which will make their mental health issues worse because the only way to fully resolve mental health issues is through positive connections with other people. That's why I have a problem with media companies like Truly promoting these kinds of people and attempting to normalize this behavior. And certainly if you've watched my content before, then you'll know that there is literally no bar low enough for Truly's channel. They will literally post content glorifying a person voluntarily making themselves blind.
For most people, going blind would be a nightmare. But for Jewel Chooping, it was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. She suffers from a rare condition called body integrity identity disorder, which led her to deliberately take her own sight.
I went blind on purpose, but I don't feel it was a choice.
Also, forewarning, this person Jewel has some sort of infection in her eyes that's kind of unsightly, so I'm going to censor all the pieces that do close-ups on her eyes. But in this next clip, Jewel talks about how she would pretend to be blind before she blinded herself.
Thinking about being blind made me feel comfortable. I was blind simming, which is pretending to be blind.
Now, you would think that this would be like a tale of regret, or maybe they would talk about how to prevent a person from moving towards such an extreme, but nope. This documentary flat out encourages what this woman did to herself. Here's what happened.
She found a psychologist willing to help her, and after 2 weeks of working together to make sure she was ready, they carried out Jewel's plan.
Before we go any further, allow me to say what Jewel's plan was. Her plan was to voluntarily pour harsh chemicals on her eyes for 30 minutes to make herself blind, and after just 2 weeks of talking to her, this psychologist declared this as a valid treatment and assisted her in a medical procedure to remove her eyesight, and then took her to the hospital where I'm assuming they lied to the medical staff about what they did, who then proceeded to try to save Jewel's eyesight. They actually succeeded, but she slowly lost her vision over 6 months. Now let me ask, why didn't we get to see this psychologist in the documentary? If what this person did was such a good thing, why not name him? Why not interview him for the show? Instead, they interviewed this guy.
As extreme as Jewel's case sounds, she is not alone. Dr. Michael First is a leading expert on the condition. He even coined the term BIID to describe it.
A lot of people who have this just live with it, but they don't take that step of actually actualizing it. The ethics of whether it is okay to take a normal person and make them disabled is, I think you could make it an ethical case that if you conceptualize this as treating a condition, then it's okay to do it.
What? How deranged is this psychiatrist if he thinks it was a smart idea to encourage self-harm as treatment? That would be like you going to a therapist and saying, I have a problem with alcohol, and the therapist responds, well, if you say alcohol makes you feel better, then keep drinking it.
The big fear, of course, is somebody goes ahead and gets an amputation or becomes disabled and then changes their mind. I like to encourage people to do what makes sense to make them feel better.
Yeah, what if they do change their mind? Do you think that psychologist who helped Jewel blind herself did his due diligence by approving of what she did after only 2 weeks of therapy? How many sessions did he see her? It could have been as little as once a week, which means they might have only done 2 sessions before this decision was made. Do you really think that's enough time to understand the ramifications of what she was going to do? But we aren't done. The documentary then cuts to a friend saying what a hero she is.
Does this affect our friendship at all?
No, actually, I want to thank you for sharing it with me. I think it's a really inspiring story, actually, because you've overcome a lot here. You're a very positive person. You contribute a lot to the blind community, and I think that's a great thing.
At the very end, they have Jewel saying, "Don't do it, it's dangerous." No. You guys spent 90% of this video talking about how justified her actions were, and even got a psychiatrist at Columbia University to approve of it. You don't just get to walk that back during the last few seconds of the video. Also, much like Tony with puppy play, Jewel got this idea during childhood.
I first developed the idea that I need to be blind when I was around 6 years old.
So we have another case of arrested development and a person not growing out of childlike ideations. The end result of her decision to go blind was being completely alienated from her family, so I think it's likely that she had some family issues that weren't discussed during the video, and she hyper-focuses on the blind stuff as a coping mechanism for what was going on in the home. And then when she went to a professional, instead of helping her find a healthy way of coping, the guy betrays her after only talking to her for 2 weeks. Anyway, back to people pretending to be dogs. Our next puppy comes from another Truly series called Love Don't Judge. This is Jenna's story.
This is Lorenzo. He fell in love with Jenna.
I think my favorite thing about Jenna is her ability just to embrace who she is as a puppy.
Puppy play is extremely important in my relationship. That's where a lot of my love languages lie.
When we're in public, it can be a little bit embarrassing at times.
First question, why are you doing this in public? At least the other couple, Tony and Andrew, made a point to not subject other people to their kink who didn't consent to it.
I do compartmentalize my pet play because not everyone wants or needs to see that.
In this case, I actually believe them. As far as I can see in the documentary, they only carry out the kink in places that aren't public, which is in contrast to what appears to be most people on these kinds of shows, because everyone else being interviewed is just doing this stuff all over the place. But to be fair, there are people in the kink community that are vocal about not subjecting other people to their fetish if they didn't ask for it. On the other side of that, though, we have Jenna here going to the dog park, which is full of biological dogs and their human owners.
So going to the dog park is obviously one of my favorite things.
When we're in public, I can see how it can be a little bit embarrassing at times. There's weirder things out there, like a girl pretending to be a dog isn't really the weirdest thing.
There are tons of people in the background of this shot who are just trying to have a normal experience with their dog. And of course, just to be clear, everyone, this is not sexual.
The puppy play isn't sexual. It's a lifestyle, and it's definitely it's fun.
Oh, okay.
But I don't growl and bark and, in the bedroom.
How is this not sexual? You literally have an OnlyFans account where you made $1 million off of sexualizing this kind of content. I have a lot of trouble believing that you have never once brought this into the bedroom, considering what you do for a living. Keep in mind that during the Truly video, they were probably going to that public park to shoot content for her OnlyFans page. Plus, I am sure that most of the reason that she did this interview with Truly was to promote that content.
We're gonna go to the park, and I'm thinking we'll get some usual shots of you walking on a leash, take some video, some photos. But what if we throw a Frisbee and you catch it?
In my mouth?
In your mouth, that's right. And if you catch it in your mouth, you know what you get, right?
Do I get a treat?
Yes,
I get a treat?
Yes, only if you catch it.
And then she has the audacity to say, "I'm not hurting anyone," during the Truly video, right before she films her content in a public park.
I know myself that I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not in trouble. I'm just kind of living my life out on the internet, and with that comes a lot of judgment.
A public park as in a place where kids like to go. And she even talks about having kids see her doing this.
And let's say that a 4-year-old kid walks up to you and is kind of looking at you and trying to figure out what's going on. Does the part of your brain that's oh, I want to explain this to this kid so the kid isn't totally freaked out, does that kick in, or are you so in the zone that you're just grr, get away, grr?
So usually you kind of break out when I'm in public and my partner isn't there. I'm kind of a little bit more diligent about like how I'm acting. So like if a kid came up to me, I would probably sit on my butt and like just kind of chill.
Her answer shouldn't be hypothetical behavior. Her answer should be, I would never put myself in a position where a kid would see me doing this. That was roughly Tony and Andrew's answer, so I'm not sure how Jenna is not able to figure that out. It doesn't matter if you act normal if they walk up to you, if they can see you acting like that from far away, which we know is happening based on how she responded to the question. Speaking of this interview from No Jumper, Jenna actually mentioned some of the stuff that I was talking about in terms of where this behavior might originate.
Yeah, I had kind of a not bad relationship, but I would say like kind of strained with my parents. They were very, very busy. And I didn't really, my dog was always there for me.
Now, I think a lot of this gets glossed over because neglect doesn't sound as spicy as full-on abuse, but not being there for your kids can be pretty harmful, which is why I don't like Modern Families. A lot of the modern feminist models for parenting are basically recommending parental neglect as a form of childcare by pretty exclusively promoting parents who work as desirable instead of parents who actually spend time with their kids. Speaking of noisy dogs that bark for hours, a lot of those dogs are barking out of psychological distress because their owners never take care of them. Kids can be the same way, especially if they're being ignored. Also, one of the big negatives of neglect is that if you don't pay close attention, then you leave kids very vulnerable to predators, which, unfortunately, is something that I imagine happened to Jenna because I've yet to see someone who chose sex work as a career who wasn't a victim of sexual abuse in their childhood. Why is this an issue, you might ask? I mean, she's just a content creator. That's not the problem. The problem is that kids who get exposed to this kind of stuff from a young age have trouble connecting to other people in adulthood, and they often adopt dangerous behaviors like this.
I wanted to do a heavy impact scene, and we ended up doing that. And it was a long scene. Whenever we finished, the entire convention was crowded and like watching us do this scene, and I had no idea.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was wild. Like, it was a really good scene.
Was he like socking you?
I like punches, I like kicks, and yeah, he was kicking the shit out of me. I
Because
was so
like
bruised.
a thud, like boom,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
you wouldn't want like the kind of punch that's gonna crack your fucking jaw off and you gotta go to the hospital,
Yeah,
right?
well, there's been multiple times where I've done scenes and like I've accidentally got super hurt. That's how I actually figured out that I have TMJ pretty bad. I was doing a grappling scene, and someone kicked me in the face like by accident. Their like foot slipped, and I couldn't open my mouth for 6 months. Like, it was awful.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I've accidentally like gotten hurt, and you have to be really careful. It's like controlled chaos. Because when you're being hit and whenever you're being like whatever, like you can break bones.
Yes, she is consenting to this, but at what point do we call it self-harm? How is this any different from cutting? She is literally admitting to getting beat up and hurt, and we are supposed to just pretend this is healthy and okay. The people who produce these new woke docuseries never seem to go into how easy it is to accidentally end someone or severely/permanently harm someone by engaging in this kind of behavior. Remember, love, don't judge.
Nobody has the right to judge somebody else for being happy.
Well, I'm certainly going to judge if what's making you happy is harmful to you or other people.
I like to get beat because it makes me feel happy and good.
As for Jenna, again, this was all supposed to be a happy and positive thing, right? It's just an alternative lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, if she really feels that's the case, then why does she dance around calling herself an OnlyFans creator?
Despite what I do on my website and everything, if I didn't do what I do now, I wanted to be in the medical field.
If you were actually proud of the way you pay your bills, then you wouldn't be trying to hide what you do. I think her boyfriend even does it as well.
I met Jenna at a photo shoot last year. We sort of clicked almost right away on set.
I met Jenna at a photo shoot. What kind of photo shoot was it? Wait, I think we got two different answers here because he said something different during the podcast.
Yeah, so the first time we met was at my birthday party at a strip club.
Red flag, a strip club is not a place to meet stable women, especially when it comes to the talent. Like I said, what kind of photo shoot was it? But really, this all goes back to the whole statement about them saying that they aren't hurting anyone.
I know myself that I'm not hurting anybody.
And that might be the case for some of the people in the kink space, but also a ton of them are inappropriately involving other people in their activity who didn't consent. By the way, let's listen to where Jenna got the idea for puppy play.
When did it start to kind of click in your head that maybe you had like a fetish for this kind of thing? Did you like read something online or see something on TV that sort of like sparked this, or how did it start to click?
So actually, when I was like 18, I went to a rope convention and I met a couple of puppies. And so we were talking,
and that's what you call people who are into what you're into?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like they were into pet play, which is like the umbrella term, but they were specifically puppies. That's what they kind of like most identified as. I don't know. But we got to talking and I was like, man, like these people, like I think a lot of the same ways.
So she got the idea from a sexual environment at a bondage convention. So much for saying it's not sexual, and then she's taking that idea that she got from a convention and doing it out in public spaces. Like I said, there is a part of the kink community that doesn't want this stuff out in public, but then there are plenty of people like Jenna doing this in very public areas with a ton of people.
I don't know. So I try to whenever I do like puppy stuff in public, like it's very like, I don't go up to other people. I don't I'm in my own element, and it's wild because I could be out in the middle of Times Square and like, whenever you're in this like headspace, it's like the world dissolves around you. So it's like in the kink world, it's called, they have a whole bunch of words for it, but like pup space or like puppy space. But there's also like different, like the most broad I can say is like bottom space and top space. So you kind of enter into this, like, it's like being on drugs. It's wild because it's like everything kind of melts around except for you and your partner.
Well, in the psychology world, this is called dissociating, and it's not considered a healthy coping mechanism. She even said it was like drugs, and then goes into talking about a heavy impact scene, which again is another euphemism for what is actually going on. But Jenna's behavior in public is absolutely not appropriate, and she's not the only example of this. This stuff is all over the place. I mean, everyone already knows what goes on at pride parades in public areas where people of all ages can see it. But also, this kink stuff is so ubiquitous now that it's basically ruined stuff like anime conventions. I don't think I've been to a convention within the past 5 or 10 years or so where people weren't publicly engaging in inappropriate behavior. What if I have a 7-year-old daughter who likes Sailor Moon, and on the way to a booth to buy a Sailor Moon plushie, she gets exposed to a guy being stepped on and whipped by a cat of 9 tails? This kind of shit occurs at anime conventions all the time, and it's not just in a secluded 18+ section, it's in all ages areas. I'm not kidding. Signs like this that say I'll step on you for $5 are all over conventions. And apparently not just at anime conventions, because I was told that this particular picture was taken at a gaming convention. But it happens at anime conventions all the time, and that is literal sex work being advertised in an area where all ages are allowed. They're trading favors for money. Like I can't even walk around and enjoy my Japanese cartoon merch without being exposed to people getting off to some degenerate crap. This is not a BDSM convention. Seriously, do not take your kids to an anime convention unless that convention makes a very public statement saying that this kind of stuff is not allowed in all ages areas. But again, let's bring it back to the problem with this stuff. Well, I think Jenna has something to say about it.
Interesting. Yeah, is it hard to find? Do you mostly like meet people through that world?
I think for me, it's a little bit easier when it, like certain aspects of it, but definitely like for the level of like play that I like, I'm pretty limited to like the kink world.
Yes, what happens when you have these niche proclivities is that it makes it so you can only be sexual around a select group of people, and in Jenna's case, that group includes people who are willing to harm a woman or willing to watch her get harmed publicly for gratification. You cannot separate those behaviors from psychology, and people who act that stuff out always have something else going on. They always have some other issue like sociopathy, low empathy, low stress tolerance, inability to remove pathological behaviors, inability to compromise, etc. And what's worse is that when you get into these kinds of behaviors instead of getting treatment, they keep getting more and more severe. First with Jenna, it was just being tied up. Then it's being tied up and hit. Then it's pretending to be a dog. Much like a drug addiction, she's going to keep needing more and more intense forms of stimulation to be aroused. By the way, this also happens often when people frequently view adult material on the internet. They keep choosing more and more intense materials because nothing is ever satisfying enough. If you find yourself having to look at very intense material just to get off, then it's time to get treatment. Like Jenna said, she basically can only be sexual around the people who are into what she's into, meaning that she has trouble getting off unless her partner is willing to harm her. And she actually says that in the interview.
For the level of like play that I like, I'm pretty limited to like the kink world. And I mean, like I could like slow it down for myself and like, but then there's, those issues of like like not being satisfied and feeling some sort of way about it, and then like taking it out on them.
Most behaviors are not separate from psychology, so you have to ask, what kind of person is willing to do that to her? Now, when it comes to actual treatment, one of the benefits of this ideology is that you can actually flip it around. Behaviors affect your psychology, and that's one of the perceptions that got me attached to Eastern philosophy. In systems like yoga, psychological change is not done by convincing yourself into a set mentality. It's achieved by following a sequence of behaviors or restraints. If you aren't at the point where you can afford treatments, then you can accomplish a lot by adopting the behaviors of healthy people, to the extent that if you can discipline yourself to do these things long enough, then you'll actually start to change how you think. That's why people like Jordan Peterson say clean your room. Acting out the behavior of a healthy person will make you feel better. You can also do things like tell the truth or at least try not to lie. You can work to develop a useful skill. You can exercise. And as I always say, when you do start changing your behaviors, make the changes so easy that even you can do them. Then as you succeed to make changes, you make those changes harder. At first, the definition of cleaning your room might be just making your bed. That's pretty simple. After 2 weeks of doing that, now it means make your bed and clean the floor. After a month, it means make your bed, clean the floor, and organize the clutter on the countertops, nightstands, or bookshelves. You keep expanding the definition as you become more and more competent and more able to handle difficult tasks. Doing this stuff will not only start to heal your psychology, it will also make you more desirable to good people, which in turn will help your mental health. Then when you can afford it, you go get treatment. Anyway, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.